Okay, so there are these two sorts of things that exist, right? There are concrete things made of matter and energy and stuff, like stars and protons and poppadoms and HMS Invincible and Olivia Wilde. But there's also abstract things. Abstract things don't exist in space and time, and they are causally inert. They cannot cause anything to happen in the universe. Things like numbers, sets, the national anthem, the letter Z, the colour red, the play Hamlet as opposed to any particular copy of it. These things are known as abstracta, which is the plural of abstractus. The distinction between abstract and concrete objects is an extremely prevalent one in the philosophy of the last century and is still being talked about today, which makes it all the more odd that we don't really have a clear idea of what the distinction is or whether abstracta even exist. Philosophers who believe that abstracta exist are called Platonists with a small p, and those who deny that they exist are called nominalists, and of course some people are in between, saying that certain types of abstracta exist and certain types don't. One of the most famous and clear discussions of abstracta comes in David Lewis's book On the Plurality of Worlds, a book which has rocked metaphysics ever since its publication, and in which the discussion appears as kind of a side note. Lewis outlines 4 ways which are supposed to help draw the abstract-concrete distinction. The way of example. This is basically what I used earlier on. Concrete things are things like bacon, peanut butter, and the ocean, and abstract things are things like numbers and sets. But as Lewis points out, we don't really have an uncontroversial understanding of what the heck numbers and sets are. The debate about what numbers are is something we're going to have to get into another time, but it's certainly a very lively one. Lewis's point is that the way of example doesn't really have any good examples. The way of conflation. This says that the difference between concrete and abstract is the same as the distinction between individuals and sets. But again, we don't really know what sets are. Some people think they're abstract objects, and some others, like class nominalists, say that a set is just all of its members. So the set of the Avengers is just all of the individual Avengers referred to together. There isn't an extra abstract object, the Avengers. So again, this is a controversial move. The way of abstraction. The idea here is to take concrete objects and remove any specificity from them. So, a copy of Hamlet is a concrete object. Hamlet the play is an abstractus. Strawberries, apples, and the flag of China are all concrete instances of red things. The colour red, just on its own, is an abstractus. But again, it's controversial to talk about these things as if they are really existing objects. We might appeal to class nominalism and say that Hamlet is just all the copies of Hamlet, and if you were to destroy all the copies and everyone forgot the story, then alas, poor Hamlet, it no longer exists. Red is just all of the red things, no abstractus required. Or maybe the way of abstraction is just a trick of our language. We think we're talking about Hamlet, the abstract object, but actually we're talking about a concrete copy of it and verbally ignoring its specificities. The way of negation. Concrete objects have locations in space and time and have causal powers, and abstracta don't. That's it. This poses some pretty obvious problems. If abstracta are causally inert, then how did we get to know about them? They can't cause anything to happen in our brains like a concrete object can, so how did we ever discover them? Our senses seem equipped to deal with things in time and space that can causally affect us, but how would we have evolved the kind of super sense necessary to see into the abstract realm? Also, there's this whole other class of objects existing outside space and time. Occam's razor is going to recommend not believing in those if we can possibly help it, so we need to be absolutely sure that some other theory, like fictionalism or class nominalism, isn't going to do the same job as these abstracta without the need for this weird other realm. Also, does this even make sense? If there's this thing that exists outside time and space and which is completely undetectable, then how is that different from nothing? In particular, note that these 4 ways can conflict. You might say that Hamlet is an abstractus according to the way of abstraction. It's non-specific, but it's surely located in time and space. It was written at some point between 1599 and 1601, so it had a beginning. It can't have existed timelessly before Shakespeare even wrote it, and it's surely located more on Earth than it is on Jupiter, so it kind of has a location. And what if you said something like, Hamlet makes me feel sad, or introverted, or self-critical? Well, then it surely had a causal effect on you. Despite these troubles, if you read any modern metaphysics, you'll find this distinction occasionally referred to and even relied on, even though you've kind of had a look behind the curtain now and you can see it's a little bit blurry. What do you guys think? Can you think of any examples of abstract objects, or better ways of drawing the distinction? Send me your questions, comments, queries and comebacks underneath the video on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or by email. Next time we could either do Schopenhauer's Aesthetics, which is probably the closest I'm going to be able to take you to Eastern philosophy, those of you who are requesting that, or we could begin a two-part metaphysics discussion on are possible worlds real? That would involve using the first of the next two episodes to explain Lewis's modal realism, and then using the one after that to talk about a sci-fi film that I quite like, which I think illustrates one of the problems with it. For more philosophical videos every Friday, please subscribe. Also, one other thing, I'm on Patreon now, so if you wanted to support the channel, then there are cool rewards like shoutouts in the show that you can earn by doing that, so you'll find me on Patreon and there's a link in the description and everything, so thanks. I'm continually pleased with everybody's ability to discuss traditionally inflammatory topics in a very intelligent way, so let's see what the philosophers had to say about leaked nudes and revenge porn. Lots of people were suggesting really intelligent counterexamples to the situations we were discussing. Icarius Notarius asked, what if you used a photo of somebody that they took consensually and put in the public domain consensually, and you used it for sexual gratification, but they probably wouldn't be okay with that, like a Facebook photo? I think in that case I'm inclined to say it's not as bad as the cases we were discussing, because you're not really violating their bodily autonomy, and there's a risk if you say that that's bad of punishing people for what they think in that case, which isn't okay. But I mean, if you were to tell them that, or they were to find out, or maybe you were to use that photo for like a threat, like you burnt it or something and then showed it to them, then that might cause them some distress. Similarly, David Rutten asked, what about nude drawings of somebody that you'd made yourself, or nudes of a lookalike that were consensually made? Again, I think in that case it's at least not as bad as the things we were discussing, because you're not violating anybody's bodily autonomy. But again, if they found out that you've done that, then that might creep them out, in which case it could be wrong insofar as it produces suffering. I'm also inclined to say, Austin Labonte and Ursula Patriarch, that if somebody consents to naked images of them being distributed and then changes their mind, then you would be overriding their autonomy by then viewing them, so that would be bad, I think. And Doma Mastrolengo, in a case where one person in a sex tape consents to its distribution and the other person doesn't, I would say it would probably be bad to override that person's autonomy by watching it. But on the other hand, if nobody watched it, then the person who consents to its distribution isn't harmed by that. So I would say probably do no harm in that case. These are some very nuanced, clever counterexamples. Well done, everybody. Elliot Collins reminded us that leaked is not the correct word to use when talking about Jennifer Lawrence's nude images specifically, which were in fact stolen. I meant the video to apply to leaked nudes without consent generally, but yes, thank you very much for reminding us that that is a thing that happened. Critical Lit pointed out that the presumption that it's okay to look at leaked nudes is part of a wider phenomenon of viewing women's bodies as public property, which also has some other unfortunate manifestations in the form of street harassment and, indeed, public sexual assault, which YouTube has talked so much about over the last few weeks since Mr. Pepper's... call them what they are, crimes, since his crimes. This was an excellent comment, I think more people should read it, so I will put a link to it in the description. Dominoes37 said that sexual urges are a natural thing, so how can you blame somebody for indulging them? I don't know, tendencies towards violence are pretty natural as well, but I'd be a little upset if somebody indulged those tendencies on me. I guess more importantly, we're also acknowledging that it's possible to indulge your sexual urges in a way that doesn't harm other people, so we're not so much condemning the sexual urges themselves as just the way in which they were indulged in the cases we were discussing. Akira Okihu asked, why would you want to look at leaked images of celebrities when there are millions of naked people online that you can look at without violating their autonomy? There's an American stand-up comic called Doug Stanhope who does a routine about going to a strip club and only being interested in the waitress. You should look it up. That's all the time we have this week. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!